April 2012. Brittany Kilgore, a 22-year-old woman living in a small apartment in Fallbrook, California, was packing her belongings. Cardboard boxes stacked in the middle of the room, her plane ticket already booked. Tomorrow, she would leave back to Missouri, back to her family, leaving behind a cold, broken marriage to a husband deployed in Afghanistan. She thought she just had one last night here. But that evening, a man knocked on her door. A dinner invitation on a yacht, seemingly harmless, polite. A gentle reassurance, "Don't worry, everything's fine." And just minutes after she stepped out of her apartment, her friend's phone buzzed with two chilling words: "Help me." Days later, Brittany was found by the lake, her body naked, marred by wounds so haunting even the most seasoned investigators couldn't shake the image. Behind her death lay a dark, depraved world few could imagine. A conspiracy, twisted minds, and a trap set long before she even opened that door. And this is Brittany's story. A story that only grows colder the deeper you go. What began as an ordinary night turned into a horrifying ordeal of torture and humiliation, the kind of cruelty you'll only truly grasp if you stay through to the end. Watch closely, and you'll see why this case has haunted an entire community for years. This isn't just a cautionary tale, it's a brutal, unflinching look at the darkest corners of human nature. Where are you listening from? What time is it where you are? Is the sky still glowing faintly outside, or has the night already fallen? Silent, silent like the night. Brittany stepped out of her apartment for the last time. Do you believe a seemingly harmless invitation could lead to tragedy? Do you ever wonder if the people around you with polite smiles and kind words might be hiding something unspeakable beneath? Leave me a comment below. I'd truly love to know where you're tuning in from and what you're thinking as this story unfolds. And don't hesitate to share your thoughts along the way, because this isn't just Brittany's story. It's a reminder to all of us of the mistakes anyone can make. And if you'd like to join me for more stories like this, cases just as chilling, just as unsettling, don't forget to hit subscribe and turn on notifications, because the darkness never runs out of secrets. And I'll be here to tell you about them. And now, let's begin the story. Brittany Dawn Kilgore was born on February 4th, 1990 in Kansas City, Missouri, into a working-class family. Her parents divorced when she was still young, and throughout her childhood, she lived with her mother. Friends and acquaintances remembered Brittany as a quiet, gentle soul, sometimes even shy. She avoided crowds and disliked noise, but she had a warmth about her that made her easy to like. Always polite, always neat, she carried herself with a soft grace. Brittany liked taking photos, light makeup, keeping herself put together, and deep down, she dreamed of one day having a peaceful, stable home of her own. After graduating high school in Missouri, Brittany chose not to pursue college. Instead, she stayed close to her family, working small jobs to help her mother and maintain a simple, modest life. Though the family was far from wealthy, Brittany never complained. She just quietly hoped for her own chance at happiness. In 2010, at just 20 years old, Brittany met Corey Kilgore, a young Marine stationed in California, home on leave in Missouri. Corey was confident, steady, and gave Brittany the sense of safety she longed for. Before long, he proposed, and Brittany said yes, believing it was the start of a better life. After the wedding, she followed Corey to Fallbrook, California, a small town just outside the gates of Camp Pendleton Marine Base. They rented a modest apartment and began their life together. But the happiness Brittany thought she had found quickly faded. Corey was often away for work and eventually deployed to Afghanistan, leaving Brittany alone. She lived quietly in their small apartment, with no family nearby, no steady job, and only a few acquaintances in the same complex, like Channy Tal and Elizabeth Hernandez. Day by day, Brittany grew lonelier and more homesick. She confided in her friends that the marriage had grown cold, empty, and she just wanted to go back home to Missouri to start over. In early April 2012, Brittany made up her mind. On April 10th, she went to the San Diego County Courthouse and filed for divorce. That evening, she called her mother, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'll be home soon." She booked a flight, started packing her belongings, and asked her friends to help her box everything up. In those last few days, people noticed a change in her. She seemed lighter, her eyes a little brighter, as if she'd finally found a way out after 2 long years trapped far from home. On the afternoon of April 13th, 2012, Brittany Kilgore was packing her belongings, getting ready to move out. Channy Tal came over to help her pack. The small apartment was cluttered with tall stacks of cardboard boxes, each item carefully folded and set aside by Brittany, ready for her flight back to Missouri. As the two of them were nearly done, a sudden knock on the door broke the quiet. Brittany looked up slightly puzzled, then walked over to open it. Standing outside was Louis Ray Perez, a man she only knew in passing. He was more than 20 years her senior, a former Marine. He wasn't a close friend, nor even a neighbor. His appearance at her doorstep was unexpected, even strange. Perez smiled politely and invited Brittany to join him that evening for a yacht dinner cruise. The sudden invitation caught her off guard. She declined, saying she was busy packing to leave California on time. What she didn't say out loud was what she felt Brittany knew full well, that Perez had a longtime girlfriend, Dorothy Maraglino. She'd met Dorothy a few times through their mutual friend, Elizabeth Hernandez, and she could sense Dorothy's dislike for her. The idea of going out alone with Dorothy's boyfriend made her uncomfortable. To Brittany, it seemed wiser to keep her distance from Perez beyond a polite acquaintance. Perez looked disappointed, but didn't give up right away. He lingered, trying to convince her that the yacht dinner would be fun and worth it. At that point, Brittany looked him in the eye and asked what had been on her mind since the knock. "How did you even know I lived here?" It wasn't just curiosity. The truth was, Perez had never been to her apartment before. He gave a vague answer, saying he'd asked around to find her address. The ambiguous reply only deepened her suspicion, though she didn't show it. After a while, seeing she wouldn't budge, Perez finally said goodbye. But before leaving, he handed her his phone number and told her to call if she changed her mind. Only a few minutes later, Brittany's phone buzzed with a text from Perez. The message was tempting. "If you come with me tonight tomorrow, I'll bring 5 of my friends to help you move." It was exactly the kind of help Brittany needed. She really did need people to help carry boxes, but deep down, she still felt uneasy. The same question kept circling in her mind. He already has a girlfriend. Why is he inviting me? She worried Dorothy would be angry if she found out. To ease her doubt, Brittany texted Perez directly, saying she was concerned about Dorothy's reaction. Perez replied, almost immediately reassuring her that Dorothy was completely fine with it. He explained that the 2 cruise tickets were originally for him and Dorothy, but she had suddenly fallen ill, and even suggested Brittany go in her place so the tickets wouldn't go to waste. He insisted Dorothy held no ill will toward Brittany, and that it wouldn't be a problem. To make his story more convincing, Perez even sent Brittany Dorothy's phone number, telling her she could call to check for herself. So Brittany called. No one picked up at first, so she left a voicemail introducing herself and asking about the yacht dinner that night. About 10 minutes later, Dorothy called back. Channy, still sitting there, overheard parts of the conversation. Dorothy's tone was unusually warm, even sweet, saying, "It's fine, sweetheart. Go and have fun with Louis. I'm sick, so I couldn't go. But the yacht dinner is lovely. It'd be a shame to leave California without trying it at least once." The unexpected kindness put Brittany a little more at ease. After the call, she exhaled and texted Perez to say she changed her mind and would join him for the evening. Perez quickly replied that he'd pick her up around 7:30 p.m. Even after agreeing, though, Brittany still couldn't shake an odd feeling in her chest. She told herself she really didn't know much about Louis Perez, a middle-aged man who suddenly showed her this much interest. To feel safer, Brittany did something cautious and smart. She texted her close friends, Channy, Elizabeth, Jessica, letting them know exactly where she was going and with whom. In her message, she included everything that she'd be going to a yacht dinner cruise at San Diego Bay with Louis Perez, along with both Perez's and Dorothy Maraglino's phone numbers. It was a prudent move, but tragically, it would also be the last message Brittany sent to the outside world. At exactly 7:40 p.m., a security camera outside the apartment building captured Brittany dressed beautifully for the evening, stepping into Perez's dark-colored Ford Explorer. She gave Channy a faint smile and waved goodbye one last time before the SUV rolled out of the parking lot, disappearing into the night. Less than 10 minutes after Brittany stepped into Louis Perez's dark Ford Explorer at exactly 7:50 p.m. Channy Tal's phone buzzed with a new message. She opened it and froze. Just 2 words glowed on the screen: "Help me." Her heart pounded. Channy immediately called back, but the line only rang and went silent. No one picked up. She kept calling over and over, each unanswered ring amplifying the dread creeping up her spine. Around 8:10 p.m., another message came through from Brittany's number, this time. Stranger still, "Yes, I like this party." The short, stiff, hollow tone of the text was nothing like Brittany's usual way of speaking. Channy quickly texted back, "Brittany, call me right now so I can hear your voice." Minutes later came another reply, "Music's too loud, can't hear anything." But that did nothing to calm her. If anything, it only deepened her unease. She immediately looped in Elizabeth and Jessica, recounting everything that had happened since Brittany left the apartment. The 3 of them shared the same sinking feeling, texting in panic, scrambling for ways to reach her. They tried everything, calls, messages, social media, but Brittany never picked up, never spoke. Just the occasional clipped messages sent from her phone saying things like "I'm fine" or "having fun." Each word, each punctuation mark felt wrong, as though typed by someone else entirely. The minutes dragged on under a suffocating fear. By around 10:10 p.m., Channy couldn't stand it any longer. She typed a final blunt warning: "You need to call me right now, or I'm calling the police." Less than a minute later, the screen lit up again with a cold, emotionless response. "I'm fine," but this time that hollow message only confirmed what Channy had been dreading. Brittany Kilgore was truly in danger. Throughout the night of April 13th, into the early hours of April 14th, 2012, Brittany's small apartment sat eerily quiet. Meanwhile, Channy Tal and Elizabeth Hernandez stayed up almost all night, their phones lighting up over and over as they tried every possible way to reach her. They called, texted, checked her Facebook, and then called again, only to hear the endless ringing tone and see no sign of her. Every once in a while, they'd receive short, oddly worded texts from Brittany's phone, but the lifeless tone only deepened their fear. By morning, unable to sit still any longer, Channy and Elizabeth decided to head straight to Brittany's apartment. What they saw didn't surprise them, but it still sank their hearts. The door was locked. Brittany wasn't home, and the place looked just as it had when she left the night before. Boxes still scattered in the living room clothes, halfway folded bags, unpacked. Everything pointed to her having left the previous evening and never returned. Around 9 a.m. on April 14th, they contacted the San Diego County Sheriff's Office to report Brittany Kilgore missing. A deputy sheriff was dispatched to Fallbrook to take their statements. Sitting in a small office, Channy and Elizabeth recounted everything they knew: Brittany's hesitant agreement to go on a yacht dinner with Louis Perez, the chilling "help me" text at 7:50 p.m., followed by the strange, uncharacteristic messages that came later. Channy emphasized that Brittany was not the type to joke like that. If nothing were wrong, she would have called back to reassure everyone. But her silence all night, refusing to speak even when asked, was deeply out of character. They also gave the deputy a crucial lead. Brittany was last seen getting into a car with Louis Ray Perez, the man who had invited her to the dinner. They handed over Perez's phone number and also mentioned Dorothy Maraglino, Perez's longtime girlfriend, since Brittany had spoken with her shortly before leaving. Hearing their story, the deputy nodded gravely. A young woman sends a desperate "help me" and then vanishes without a trace that was clearly a serious case. That very afternoon, investigators called Louis Perez. To their surprise, he seemed strangely cooperative. He agreed to come down to the station voluntarily to answer questions. Around early afternoon, Perez showed up at the Fallbrook Sheriff's Office. Dressed in a dark t-shirt, he appeared calm, as though this were nothing more than a routine chat. When asked, Perez freely admitted he'd picked Brittany up the night before. According to his story, they drove toward San Diego, but midway through Brittany changed her mind and said she didn't want to go on the yacht anymore. Instead, she asked to be dropped off in the Gaslamp Quarter, a nightlife district downtown. Perez claimed he left her there around 8 or 9 p.m. and hadn't seen her since. His story, however, raised red flags. For one, Brittany wasn't dressed or prepared for a night of bar hopping, and she hadn't mentioned such plans to anyone. And why would she have texted "help me"? But the deputies kept their doubts to themselves and continued gathering details. By the end of the interview, one of the officers asked casually, "Do you mind if we have a look at your Ford Explorer?" Thinking he had nothing to hide, Perez agreed without hesitation. That was a crucial mistake. As Perez sat waiting, a team of deputies headed out to the parking lot. In the back of his Explorer, they found an AR-15 semi-automatic rifle, a powerful firearm prohibited under California state law. Even though it wasn't direct evidence of Brittany's disappearance, the illegal weapon was enough for them to arrest Perez on the spot. The moment his wrists were cuffed, Channy and Elizabeth, waiting nervously in the hallway, felt their hearts race. At least they thought the last person seen with Brittany was now in custody. But one haunting question still echoed in their minds. Where was Brittany? And that was the same question investigators now had to confront. They had their prime suspect, but Brittany Kilgore's whereabouts remained shrouded in darkness. As soon as the first pieces of evidence from Perez's Ford Explorer came to light, investigators realized this case didn't stop with him alone. Every clue pointed back to Dorothy Maraglino's house in Fallbrook, a place Perez often frequented and where Jessica Lopez also lived. On April 16th, while Perez remained in custody on weapons charges, the investigative team decided to raid the house in search of more evidence and to apprehend the two remaining women. When officers arrived, the house was completely empty. Dorothy and Jessica had vanished as if someone had tipped them off in advance. But what they left behind inside was far more disturbing than anyone expected. The place was littered with BDSM paraphernalia, chains, engraved collars, stun batons, slave contracts, and a thick notebook ominously titled The Family Handbook, meticulously outlining their internal rules and punishments. From the evidence recovered, the trio's twisted hierarchy was clear: Louis Perez as the master, Dorothy as the mistress, both lover and submissive to Perez, and the youngest, Jessica Lopez, as the slave, completely obedient to Dorothy. That evening, as the search across San Diego intensified, investigators received an unexpected lead. At around 9:30 p.m. on April 16th, the team tracked Jessica Lopez to a small motel in downtown San Diego. When the door was opened, the scene inside left everyone stunned. Jessica Lopez was sprawled on the floor, blood pooling from deep cuts on her wrists. She had attempted suicide but failed. She was rushed to the hospital in critical condition. In the disheveled room, investigators discovered a 7-page handwritten suicide note neatly placed on the table, with the words scrawled across the top. Pigs read this. The letter was filled with unhinged accusations in which Lopez claimed full responsibility for Brittany Kilgore's murder, insisting that Perez and Dorothy were completely innocent. She venomously called Brittany trash, who had ruined the relationship between Perez and Dorothy, and described in detail how she had tortured, strangled, and disposed of Brittany. Meanwhile, Dorothy Maraglino remained at large. A full-scale manhunt was immediately launched across San Diego, with Dorothy's name now at the top of the wanted list. On the morning of April 17, 2012, just hours after police found Jessica Lopez in a failed suicide attempt at a small motel in San Diego, clues from her suicide note led them to a desolate patch of land near Lake Skinner in Riverside County. It was the place Lopez described as where she had dumped her right in front of everyone like trash. When police arrived, The scene was even colder and more brutal than they had imagined. Brittany Kilgore lay motionless on the hard ground, surrounded only by weeds and scattered debris, completely naked, as if the killer had deliberately left her exposed in the cruel wilderness as a final humiliation. A quick examination at the scene confirmed her identity. It was Brittany. The area was immediately sealed off as the forensics team began documenting every horrific detail on her body. Her corpse reeked of bleach, clearly poured over her in an attempt to destroy DNA evidence or mask the odor of death. Deep circular bruises around her neck indicated she had been strangled. Her wrists and ankles were bruised and abraded, bearing clear signs of having been tightly bound or handcuffed. But that was not all. On Brittany's skin, forensic examiners also noted numerous tiny burn marks, consistent with injuries from a stun gun or electric baton. A chilling reminder of the stun gun text Brittany had sent her friends that night, a warning that had now come true. Even more gruesome, they found large, shallow cuts on her legs and abdomen, jagged, broken cuts, suggesting someone had attempted to dismember her with a power saw, but abandoned the effort midway. Perhaps the killer was rushed, or perhaps even they couldn't stomach the sight of what they had done. Ultimately, the cause of death was determined. Brittany had been strangled to death. The time of death was estimated to be the night of April 13th, into the early hours of April 14th. The same night she vanished from her apartment. Every detail, from the bleach, the stun gun, the bindings to the saw marks, painted a harrowing picture. This was no ordinary murder, but a depraved ritual of torture, meticulously planned in advance. Immediately after Brittany's body was discovered, San Diego police, in coordination with Riverside authorities, accelerated the investigation. Luis Perez, who was still being held for weapons violations, instantly became the focal point. As the grim news spread, investigators re-examined Perez's Ford Explorer in detail. This time, they uncovered indisputable evidence: a plastic bag containing blood-stained rubber gloves and a large stun baton hidden in the rear compartment. On-site tests showed the blood on the gloves was Brittany's, while Perez's own DNA was on the stun baton. These items amounted to nothing less than a mobile murder kit, directly tying Perez to Brittany's death. With a body with blood with a weapon, by now, police knew the case had entered a new phase. Around 7 p.m. that same day, April 17th, investigators tracked Dorothy Maraglino hiding in a small apartment on the outskirts of San Diego, where she had been staying with an acquaintance. When police moved in, Dorothy offered no resistance. She stepped out, her hand resting on her pregnant belly, the child later confirmed to be Perez's, and coldly extended her wrists to be cuffed. Not a confession, not a denial, just an empty gaze as she was led away. By the end of April 17th, all three suspects, Luis Perez, Jessica Lopez, and Dorothy Maraglino, were in custody. The three links in a dark conspiracy now lay in the hands of the police, ready for the truth to be brought into the light. With all three perpetrators in custody, the pieces of the tragedy slowly fell into place through confessions evidence and Jessica's chilling suicide note. The truth was even more brutal than anyone imagined. Brittany Kilgore's death wasn't a moment of jealous rage, but a sadistic torture ritual meticulously planned by the trio. Prosecutors believed Brittany was never invited on a real dinner cruise. From the moment Luis Perez texted her about dinner and a scenic cruise on the night of April 13th, he had already set the trap, turning Brittany into prey in his depraved game. Around 7:40 p.m., Brittany stepped into Perez's Ford Explorer in an elegant dress, believing she was heading for a romantic evening. But instead of driving toward the San Diego Marina, the SUV veered into a quiet neighborhood in Fallbrook, where Dorothy Maraglino's house waited. By about 7:50, Brittany's unease peaked. She secretly sent a hurried text, "Help me," a short plea to her friend, Channy Tal, and the last call for help she'd ever managed to send. The SUV screeched to a stop outside the dark house. Brittany may have tried to step back, but Perez, armed with an AR-15, forced her inside what would become her death chamber. Dorothy Maraglino and Jessica Lopez were already waiting. The moment she stepped through the door, they grabbed her, twisted her arms behind her back, and snapped cold metal handcuffs onto her wrists. Her screams lasted only seconds. A zap-stun baton, packing over 1,000,000 volts, crackled to life, its blue spark burning into her skin. The tiny burns later found on her body bore witness to those jolts. Within 5 minutes, Brittany was subdued, bound, possibly gagged, her phone stripped away. That's when the nightmare truly began. She was dragged into the basement, a dungeon the trio had carefully prepared for their violent BDSM rituals. Her clothes were ripped away, leaving her naked under the harsh neon lights and the ravenous stares of her captors. According to both Jessica's confession and forensic evidence, Brittany was beaten mercilessly, repeatedly shocked, and very likely sexually abused with the toys later recovered from the house. Meanwhile, her friends kept trying to reach her, but the replies they received, "I'm fine," or "having fun," came from Dorothy or Jessica trying to buy time. Their clumsy tone only deepened suspicion, and her friends reported her missing to police the next morning. In the basement, Brittany continued to endure electric shocks, suffocating restraints, and excruciating pain. In her final hours, she may have begged for her life, but to the trio, her pleas only aroused them more. Jessica's letter and a video found on Perez's computer showed this was not his first time tormenting a begging victim. Eventually, when Brittany's strength failed, the trio decided to end her. A rope was wrapped around her neck, tightened loop by loop until her weak struggles ceased and her body went still. But the horror wasn't over. That night, Dorothy, who had once written out a list of ways to dispose of a body, discussed their next move. They first tried cutting Brittany apart with a power saw, leaving shallow, jagged cuts on her legs and torso, but stopped midway, perhaps repulsed by the sight or frightened by the noise. Instead, they chose another method: bleach the body to destroy evidence and dump it in a remote area. The basement lights glared down on her battered, naked body as Dorothy poured bleach over her, scrubbing, especially at sensitive areas, to erase DNA and mask the smell of death. By dawn, Perez and Jessica loaded her into the SUV and drove more than 70 kilometers to a desolate patch near Lake Skinner in Riverside. They dragged Brittany out, dumped her among the weeds, and coldly drove away, leaving her alone in the night. The entire crime took place in just one night. On the morning of April 14th, Louis Perez walked into the police station, convinced his plan was flawless. Dorothy and Jessica cleaned the basement and left the house as if nothing had happened. But Brittany's desperate "help me" text had already prompted her friends to contact police, putting the investigation into overdrive. 3 days later, her body was found. And soon, after all three killers were in custody, their dark secret laid bare for all to see. After the crime was exposed, what shocked the public even more than the brutality was the question why. Why would a kind, blameless young woman like Brittany become the target of such a horrific plan? The investigation uncovered two key answers: sadism and hatred. The trio, Perez, Maraglino, and Lopez, had long shared an obsession with extreme sadistic sexual fantasies. Court records revealed that ordinary consensual BDSM no longer satisfied them. They were aroused by the idea of crossing all boundaries of law and morality. In the Fallbrook home, police recovered disturbing writings, a short story by Dorothy about abducting 3 generations of women and torturing each before killing them. Another story describing Dorothy slitting a woman's throat while she was having sex with Perez. In Perez's garage, they even found a handwritten list of hunting grounds and detailed body disposal methods that Dorothy had drafted as part of a deadly script. Jessica Lopez's encrypted diary contained equally chilling entries fantasizing about abducting, torturing, and bleaching away the evidence from a woman she hated. These dark fantasies finally materialized on Brittany's body. One prosecutor later remarked they killed Brittany simply to satisfy their sadistic desires. For them, this wasn't about money or revenge. It was a sick game they had been planning for a long time. But there was more. Hatred deeply rooted in Dorothy also made Brittany a target. Dorothy became obsessed with the idea that Brittany was coming between her and Perez. Although Brittany had never shown romantic interest in Perez, even turning him down out of fear, Dorothy might misunderstand. In Dorothy's mind, Brittany had to be eliminated. Friends of Brittany had already noticed Dorothy glaring at her, treating her coldly, and calling her cruel names behind her back like herpes bitch, as if she were a disease to be eradicated. One witness recounted how Dorothy had once flown into a jealous rage over another woman, Marina, a previous lover of Perez. Back then, Dorothy threatened to kill Marina and her young child, even posting online that she wanted Marina to die a painful death. So when it came to Brittany, young, beautiful, independent, she seemed to embody everything that sent Dorothy into a jealous frenzy. On the night of April 13th, Dorothy pretended to be understanding when she called Brittany to reassure her, but it was just to lure her into the trap. Even in Jessica's suicide note, she echoed the same twisted hatred. She ruined Dorothy and Perez's happiness. Investigators believe it was Dorothy who planted the idea and pushed the group to make Brittany their victim. One more chilling detail emerged just one day before the crime, on April 12th. Perez texted an acquaintance in the BDSM scene named Alda, cryptically saying he was preparing for a special session with someone I don't like, adding that it would help him control myself, so I don't hurt the person I really want to hurt. Alda immediately saw it as a red flag and urged him to stop, but Perez ignored the warning. Looking back now, it's hard to doubt the one he didn't like was Brittany, and the one he didn't want to hurt may well have been Dorothy. In Perez's twisted mind, hurting Brittany would appease Dorothy's jealousy, keep Dorothy by his side, and satisfy his own sadistic urges all at once. In the end, those cold calculations led them from fantasy to reality and to a brutal, premeditated murder. The murder of Brittany Kilgore, with its chilling details of a depraved sex cult, quickly gripped public attention and outrage. It took more than 3 years of investigation, evidence gathering, and legal proceedings before the trial of the three killers began in late 2015 at the San Diego Superior Court. Luis Ray Perez, Dorothy Maraglino, and Jessica Lopez stood trial facing a long list of charges: conspiracy to kidnap, kidnapping, torture, sexual assault, and first-degree murder. Over 5 weeks of testimony, jurors and onlookers heard the full harrowing story: the fabricated dinner cruise, Brittany's desperate "help me" text her naked body, abandoned in the weeds, and the disturbing evidence of the defendant's sadistic BDSM obsession. Prosecutors emphasized that Brittany was completely innocent and never consented to any of their games. She was lured into a trap and tortured to death. In court, the three tried to blame one another. Jessica Lopez retracted the confession she had written in her suicide note, claiming she was merely a brainwashed slave under Dorothy's control, forced to take the blame. Perez's lawyer argued that Brittany had died at Jessica's hands in a jealous rage, and Perez only helped dispose of the body. Dorothy's defense insisted she did not directly participate in the attack or killing, claiming she only helped clean up after Brittany was already dead. But none of their excuses could outweigh the damning evidence: Brittany's blood in Perez's SUV, his DNA on the stun baton, a violent video found on his computer, Jessica's detailed confession, and a trove of chilling writings that revealed their murderous intent. The fact that they maintained a fully equipped torture dungeon was enough to send shivers through the jury. On October 22, 2015, the jury convicted all three of first-degree murder, along with multiple related charges. Luis Perez, Dorothy Maraglino, and Jessica Lopez were all sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Perez and Dorothy each received additional consecutive life sentences for the sheer brutality of their crimes, ensuring they would never walk free again. As the verdict was read, Perez buried his face and wept. Dorothy stared ahead, cold and unflinching, and Jessica sat blank and silent. In the gallery, Brittany's family sobbed and held one another. Her mother said softly, "Our daughter was beautiful and pure. She didn't deserve any of this. She will always be loved and remembered by us." For many, it was the only fitting end for three people who had turned their darkest desires into one of the most horrifying crimes in San Diego's history. The murder of Brittany Kilgore left a deep scar on the collective memory of San Diego and the entire nation. It exposed a chilling truth. Even in ordinary neighborhoods, behind seemingly ordinary faces, there are those who harbor twisted desires and are willing to act on them at any cost. Brittany, a kind, beautiful young woman who loved life, became the victim of a cold, calculated plan simply because she caught the obsessive gaze of Dorothy Marilino and the sadistic fury of Louis Perez. She was not their enemy. She owed them nothing. Yet, in the warped minds of the trio, Brittany became the perfect sacrifice for the dark game they had long fantasized about. On the day Brittany was laid to rest, hundreds gathered to say goodbye, carrying white flowers and tearful farewells. Her headstone bore a simple inscription, "Brittany Kilgore, forever loved." Her story stands as a heartbreaking reminder that sometimes trust and kindness are betrayed in the cruelest ways. But from that pain, justice was done, and the three killers now pay the ultimate price behind bars forever. For her family, her friends, and even strangers who never knew her, Brittany Kilgore will always be remembered not for how she died, but for who she was, strong, gentle, and innocent, in a world that can so often be merciless. Thank you for staying with me until the end of today's story. Brittany Kilgore is gone, but her death serves as a stark reminder that unrestrained lust and hatred can turn people into monsters, and anyone could become their victim. If this story made you reflect, please share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications to follow more stories with me, because knowledge today could prevent a tragedy tomorrow. See you in the next story.